Hello, this is Anthony Ferris. I wanted to talk a little bit about the discussion that's going on about the national anthem, the athletes that are kneeling in protest, and I kind of wanted to give my take on it. I love politics, and I'm also a sports fan. So when these two worlds kind of collided, and everybody's saying, giving their opinion, I kind of figured, well, I might as well give mine. Um, and I do so with the understanding that there are those who will disagree with me. But that doesn't mean we're not friends. If we've been friends, we're going to continue to be friends. No love lost. That's just my opinion. I'm just one person, and I'm just giving my opinion. I've listened to a lot of opinions, and I'm just giving mine. Um, First thing I want to say is that I'm a person that I don't draw absolutes unless, in my opinion, it's just an absolute. Um, Politically, I'm an independent voter because I like things from both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Um, and I don't want to just get locked down with a party and just stick with it. If I think that it's a Democrat that's got a better idea, I'll vote Democratic. If I think it's a Republican that's got a better format, I'll vote Republican. I have done both, so that's why I consider myself an independent. My political views tend to be center, left, center, right, just a little bit. I'm not an extremist. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Like, for example, the whole Black Lives Matter movement. Now, as far as the notion of the concept, and I don't know everything that that particular organization does, but as far as just the concept, Black Lives Matter, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter. I think they do. Okay. Now, on the other hand, I also think that Blue Lives Matter or any other color that associates a particular group of people. I think all lives matter. Christ died for all, that all would be saved and come into repentance. So that's my religious view also. So all lives matter to me. Um, am I upset that black men are getting killed wrongfully by white police officers? Yes, very upset about that. Very concerned about that. Am I concerned about black on black crime and especially in the inner cities and the gang violence that's going on between people and African Americans killing African Americans? Very, very concerned about that. Can I be concerned about both of them at the same time? Yes, I certainly can. Um, so that's pretty much my whole spin on this particular thing. I think you can be patriotic, and at the same time, I think that you can protest and still be patriotic. My problem with Mr. Kaepernick, if I can say I have a problem, is that, and I think Stephen A. Smith kind of brought that out as far as that he didn't vote, and he talked about how he didn't vote and doesn't vote, and I think that's a grave mistake. I think two of the biggest things that we have to bring on social change is demonstration and protesting, marching, that kind of thing. But what I think is even more powerful than that is the ballot box. Uh, People who don't vote, they just accept whatever's handed down. And I just never been a person to do that. Now, there was a time period that I didn't vote, and as I begin to understand it and understand my responsibility and understand that not voting affects me just as much as voting, and I decided, well, if the law is going to be passed and I don't like the law, I'm at least going to vote against it. Or if it's a candidate that's got something that I think is just so wrong for this country or so wrong for me as a person, then I am going to vote, exercise my right to vote. So I think it's a travesty, and I think it's bad that somebody of his stature that has the platform that he has doesn't vote. I think that's a big mistake. All right. Another thing that I want to talk about and I'm concerned about is, well, let me back up. Just the idea of saying I'm an African American. I'm a black man that lives in America. I want to say that. Well, you need to go back to Africa. If you don't like the United States the way it is, you need to go back to Africa. Okay, I've never been to Africa. I wasn't born in Africa. I don't know anybody who lives in Africa. Okay, my son just came home, so I put it on pause, so I may have lost my thought. So I'm going to pick back up on another point. Um, so my point basically is that all lives matter, and I understand why Mr. Kaepernick made that particular stand. And anytime there's protest or there's demonstration, as long as it's peaceful and it's within the law, there really is no problem with it. That is just as much a right, First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, as Second Amendment. Now, you have a lot of people who are pro Second Amendment, and they'll fight you tooth and nail about their right to bear arms. And I really don't have a problem with that either. But how far do we take it? How far can we go with it? So does that mean I can have a Sherman tank in my front yard to protect my family because I got a right to bear arms, and the Sherman tank it's an arm? Or can I have a bazooka in my car and drive around with it because I got the right to bear arms? So who draws the line on what I can use as a right to bear arms? Okay, at some point, depending on what the weapon is, the government's going to step in and say, hey, you can't have that. You can't use it. But now I got a right. That's my Second Amendment right. So when it comes to freedom of speech, I think that a lot of people they're just as militant in their particular attitude, and they feel like, well, I'm not breaking the law, and I'm not breaking a signed agreement. Now, let's say that the football players had a signed agreement and that was part of their contractual obligation that they cannot protest on the field. And if they sign the contract and agree to work under those particular terms, and they agree to forfeit their First Amendment, then I believe that they should honor that or stand to get fired. But I think it's wrong for even the president of the United States to weigh in and say, well, we just need to fire the SOBs, fire them if they don't respect the flag. How come I can't respect the flag and still protest on some things that are going on? I just don't think that's necessarily disrespecting the armed forces. My father, he was in the service. He did 2 terms in Vietnam, and then he fought once in the Korean conflict. And he had the mental scars. When he came home, he was a different person because of what he endured fighting for this country. And at the same time, it's certain places that he couldn't go in. And I remember some of that as a young man. It was certain places that he couldn't go, certain places he couldn't take us. He wasn't given the same respect. Somebody as smart as my dad was, and I'm not just saying that because that was my dad. My dad was smart. But you can only get but so much rank because of your race, and just a lot of stuff that he went through and a lot of stuff that my mom went through. But at the same time, my dad was fighting for this country just like everybody else and couldn't enjoy the same privileges. Even when we look at the Star Spangled Banner I think it's the 3rd verse, I got it down here, the 3rd stanza right about in the middle, no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight and the shame of the grave. So when you hear a stanza like that, and you think that and you think about your people, if you're African American or you're black, that they helped to build this country, but at the same time, how they was treated, maybe the Star Spangled Banner doesn't mean as much, or it's easier to protest against it. I think basically that America, the fabric of that everything was made. This country, we say that this country was based off the biblical principles, in which it was. But at the same time, along with those ingredients was racism and prejudice, and all that was woven in the fabric, and all that's part of the foundation of this country. And so this country was built on all of that, and as this country began to excel, that stuff that was in the foundation of it's part of the fabric of this country. If you're building a house and you put some stuff that's in the foundation and it's not good, then the whole house is going to have that particular thing wrong with it. It can be great in some areas, but it's still got this. It's still weak on this side because you didn't use the right kind of concrete when you poured it, or you didn't dig deep enough, or whatever you did in the foundation. So even with systemic racism that was a part of this country from the beginning, it's really no surprise why it's still at the levels that it is now. Going to pause for another second. Okay, so I guess my point is that depending on who you are in this country, certain things mean more or less than other people. The Pledge of Allegiance, the end of it: one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Some people have enjoyed justice for all if you're in a certain group, but then certain races of people don't enjoy that same privileges overall. As great as a country this is, and like you've heard the argument, black people are making all kinds of money and they're CEOs, and we've even had a black president and stuff like that. But that still doesn't erase racism in this country. Those are wonderful things that have happened, and black people have come a long way. Uh, but as a nation, this nation is still racially divided, and I think a lot of that, well, that'll kind of get on the religious side of things, though. But my concern is that, well, I'm glad that it's being talked about. What I hate is that it's just polarizing people. Friendships are being strained by it, and it just doesn't necessarily have to be. So, for the record, I just want to say that I think that a person protesting, they have the right to, and they got to know what they're getting into, and they got to know sometimes the backlash that it brings. But if they're willing to do that and exercise their First Amendment rights, more power to them. Just like any other amendment or the Second Amendment rights, people who want to bear arms and stuff like that. If you want to drive down with an AK-47 sticking out the window, and if you can do that, and if you're not breaking the law, that's your right. Just handle it responsible and know what you know the consequences, and that's the main thing. Uh, the owners, the football players, bringing awareness to it. It is a problem in this country, and I don't think you have to be black to understand that it is a problem in this country. And something needs to be done about it on both sides. I think that, going on pause again. Okay, I'm going to sum it up. I'm going to post again tomorrow night, but this is just my introductory spin on different things. And it's kind of interesting to see how it's playing out and how it's being played out in the media. And it's causing people to take sides and, like I say, friendships to be strained. And I think that's unnecessary. Sometimes we just have to agree to disagree. But like I said, there's some cases where I just don't believe you have to take a position or the other, or taking one means you don't mean the other. So I think Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. I think both causes are important, and all lives matter. That's the bottom line. Everybody's life. Everyone is a loved one to somebody. Okay? All right, so this is Anthony Poindexter Ferris. This is my first post. I probably do about 3 of them. And I hope somebody got something out of this. Peace.